Hello and welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor live stream. Today we're going to be doing photo editing demonstrations with Luminar Neo. Each week I am here to demonstrate some photo editing tips, not just tips on how to use a particular software, but how to approach photo editing in general, what to do to your images to make them better. Each week, I receive submissions from viewers like you with some images to edit. So that's what I'm going to be demonstrating today is how to edit their images, or what I would do to edit their images using Luminar Neo. So let me pop over to Luminar Neo and I'll be right back. And just a reminder that if you would like to submit your images, if you're brand new here, use that link and you will send your images along with some information so I have an idea of what you would like me to demonstrate. So let me get started. Welcome, everybody. I see some familiar names coming back again and again. James, I think you have joined us once before. Nice to see you again. Ron Snow in Adelaide. Well, that is rare indeed. Kevin, nice to see you. I know you're doing the Luminar Neo course. That's awesome. Let's see. Stephanie's back from Oregon. Marty in Wisconsin. And where are you at, James? You said, yeah, where are you from, James? Love to know where you're joining us from. It's Dr. Steven, always nice to see you. Brandon from Calgary. I wonder if it's as hot there as it is here. So I'm trying not to melt today. I've got a small fan on me, and I'm going to do as best I can to keep my computer and myself from melting down while we're doing these demonstrations. Holly, nice to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. And Paul from New Zealand. So we got Down Under represented, Texas. Nina, is this your first time, Nina? I think I've seen you joining in before. And Vivian, I think I even have an image of yours. So let me show you the images that I am working on today. I've chosen a few. I know that I think this one was Danelle's. Brandon sent in a couple. And I want to work on this one here. So this is Brandon's image, and he sent this in of this lovely little dragonfly. And what I want to do is show you how I'm going to approach this in terms of making him stand out a little bit more. So the entire goal of photo editing is to make the subject stand out. It's not to have people look at your image and go, wow, great photo editing, or, you know, nice vignette or whatever. You want them to see the subject and to see your image, all right? So let me dig in here. So again, we're using Luminar Neo, okay? This is version, let's just see what version I have, 1.2. There is a new version coming soon, and I also do have an early build of the noiseless new extension, which is also coming soon, and I'll be doing a video on that very soon as well to demonstrate that. So far of what I've seen of it, it looks really, really promising and really, really good. So I will have that coming soon. If you haven't gotten the extension for HDR Merge, I did a little video on that a while ago. Rob, if you could please share a link to that in the chat. The HDR Merge was the first extension that they introduced with Luminar Neo. And there's going to be 6 more. We know noiseless is coming, and then beyond that, we don't know what else is coming. So at this point, I'm just sort of guessing that there might be one for panorama merge, maybe focus stacking, maybe star stacking, maybe sharpen. So things like that. I'm just thinking about what other plugins do that they may be working on for Neo to do as well. Right? James gets the prize. Aha. Holly brought James along. Awesome. Are you guys in the same camera club? Okay, so this is a Sony file from Brandon. And the first thing that I want to do is go into Develop Raw. Okay, so if you were going to be submitting your images using that link, digitalphotomentor.com digitalphotomentor.com/live. If you could share that in the chat, please, as well, Rob, the link to submit. Please send raw images if at all possible. If you are shooting JPEG, make sure to send your original unedited images. So the one from the camera, okay? So I want the biggest information, the most information, the biggest file, okay? Let's see. Okay, we've got some camera profiles, so we could take a look and see if any of these, I'm guessing is Vivid of some kind. Okay, so these are Sony profiles. This is the only place that you will find these camera profiles. Okay, that's obviously going to be black and white. And so far, I kind of like the neutral one. So I might go back to that one. Okay, although that soft color is kind of nice, actually. He already stands out a little bit more. So just by changing the camera profile, again, this is the only place that you'll encounter this, okay? He stands even more out, even more there, right? So we could bring out the color in the background, but then he's kind of lost, right? So let's take a look at the ones that were a bit more neutral or even lighter, right? So the less work we have to do on the file, the better. So camera profile to start, right? Then I generally look at curves and the histogram. If your histogram is not showing, just go up to the view menu and make sure that you turn it on. This is something that I use a lot to reference the exposure and make sure that I have clean whites and blacks, meaning that the image has nice white and black in the image. I have a video on using the histogram for your editing as well. So another link for you to grab. Thanks for joining us, Richard. And thanks so much for your wonderful reviews recently. I think it was Richard that did a review. Did he not, Rob? So now that I have the curve and the histogram showing, I'm going to turn on the clipping warnings. And you can do that by clicking up here in the histogram or just pressing the J key on your keyboard. Okay, so Rob is finding the histogram video and also the Luminar Neo keyboard shortcuts sign-up page. So I'm going to bring the highlights down, and mostly I'm looking at him. Okay, so I want to make sure that he's not clipping, but I'm bringing the highlights down to control that background a little bit. And then I'm going to add some black because there's nothing that's clipping right now. Okay, so with the blacks, okay, clipping warning on black, you'll see is blue overlay, right? If I turn it off. When you have no black, okay, so see how it's sort of flat and contrast, flat and just sort of less punchy, right? The colors are actually lighter. When we add black, see how the colors punch up as well. So that's why I'm starting with a camera profile with less color, because if we go back to one that is, let's even use the neutral, for example, right? Now we have to do some tweaks there. It's a little bit darker, but you end up getting your colors too intense, okay? So I want us to start with one that was a little bit softer to begin with. So let's go with something like that. Okay, and then I'm going to make sure the color is good. So the only place you'll find the white balance sliders is in here under develop. So if you're looking for them in the color tool, they're not there, they're here. And you can use as shot, or if you have a raw file, you'll see that you get all of the same presets that you had in the camera. So I'm going to try daylight, right? And it warmed it up a whole lot. It also added a bunch of green. So I'm going to give it a little bit of magenta and just a little bit more yellow. I'm also going to dial the saturation down a little bit because I really want to focus on him. And the more intense the color is, the less you see him, right? Then I'm just going to continue down, develop raw, and make sure that I have chromatic aberration and defringe checked off. I always check those off, right? So far, we've got a pretty good overall beginning start on this image, and that's just the develop raw tool. Okay, if I darken it overall, okay, we can see that the background gets darkened, but then he's too dark. So I'm going to leave it a little bit lighter and come back and darken the background another way. Okay. Oh, there's several different ways that you can darken the background and lighten the subject. If it was a person, you could use the portrait tools, okay, portrait bokeh, and so on. But I'm going to try the relight tool where you can lighten things in the foreground, so brighten near and darken far. And with this one, what I usually do is take it to extreme. It takes a minute sometimes for it to catch up to me. Okay, so once it catches up, now you can see that, then I just set the depth. Okay, so I can decide, okay, how much do I want to darken? Now it's not brightening him as much as I'd like. It's brightening the foreground. And that's the challenge that I find with this tool. It's more sort of top to bottom, and it doesn't always get the subject. Okay, so this one is not working, so I'm just going to get rid of it. Another way that you can darken things is to use the develop tool again. And now if we use it again, and I darken the exposure and the highlights, I might even bring the things like the contrast down as well. Okay. Now you can see that it's darkening everything, but I want it not to darken him. So I'm going to try the AI masking before I try just painting it in myself, because I want to see what it comes up with and if there's anything that I can choose here that will get me him and maybe the tree selected. Okay, so it's chosen sky. Now there isn't any sky, so that's kind of interesting. Flora, which should be just about everything in this image. Now that's actually pretty close to what I want, so we might go with that. And natural ground is sort of the opposite. So that's actually not bad either. But I'm going to go with this flora one because I want to lighten him. Okay, so this is the part that I don't want to affect. Okay, I'm going to go back to the mask and I'm going to invert it. Okay, so you'll see the opposite happen. So now everything else is being darkened. If I show the mask here, I can edit it as well. Okay, so I can just go in here and brush in anywhere else that I want to darken. And I'm going to use the strength a little bit lower at about 35%. And I'm just going to paint in these other bits that I want to darken. Okay. Maybe a little bit higher. Okay. And then I can also go in and make sure that he's not getting darkened. Make sure that he is being saved, shall we say. Okay. See, there's that little bit inside here. So make sure that when you're doing these things, you zoom in. Okay, so I'm I just clicked on the image to zoom in. Okay, so I get a little closer. See, now his wings, you could see that he is being somewhat affected. If you want to see the overlay, I should be able to just turn it on here. Okay. And then continue brushing. So I can erase it off of him as well. So I can make sure that his little wings are highlighted and his little body. We like dragonflies because they eat the mosquitoes. All right, let's turn that off and see how we're doing. Whoops. Okay, so this is what darken, in terms of darkening the background, is doing. Okay. There's a lot of sort of busyness here as well. And I'm just going to take the highlights down. I'm trying to flatten it because do you remember the 4 things that take your attention? This is one that I come up with all the time. Do you remember the 4 things that take your attention that might potentially pull you away from the subject? Okay, so these are the 4 things that I'm trying to get rid of in the background. The bright parts, the colorful parts, and the contrast. Okay, so he's sharp and the tree is sharp that he's on, and the background is nice and soft, but because there's these bright bits in the grass here, it's still taking away attention. Okay, if we use my upside down trick, okay, let me just close that one, and we could do that with the crop tool. Just put them upside down temporarily. When you look at it upside down, where does your eye go? Now we keep in mind that I've minimized some of that background already, because right now, if we look at the original, he's sort of lost, right? So we've minimized a lot of that background and he's already standing out. But what takes my attention still is this spot right here and these little bits in the background, right? These parts do draw my eye as well because one of the 4 things, they're sharp. Okay? So let's put him right side up again. Another way that you can deal with minimizing this background is to duplicate your layer. Okay, so I want to demonstrate both versions. So I've done sort of a burn layer using develop. You can also use the new dodge and burn tool, which is now down here under professional, right? But I'm going to make a duplicate layer. Okay, so to do that, you can just right click and choose duplicate, or you can literally just press D and it makes you a duplicate layer. Okay. Now you have the option of changing the blend mode. If you change it to multiply, you'll get a darkening effect. Okay. You can see that the opacity is 100%. Oh, that's interesting. It looks like my layer is underneath. This one's got the edits on it. Haha, that's interesting. So the duplicate layer went underneath. Oh, no, sorry, my bad. When you duplicate the layer, the same edits apply to the duplicate layer. So that's my bad. Right? So I want darken mode, and then we can just adjust this opacity. Okay. And of course, I can mask it as well. Okay, so if I want him to show more, I can just mask it off of him as well. So I can do erase and just erase it off of him and maybe this part of the tree. Okay. Something like that. Now I want to keep it sort of realistic looking, so I don't want to make just a bright circle around him, right? Because it's going to not look right. It's not going to look right, okay? Let me just darken it all the way. Okay, so that looks fake, right? So I want it to blend a little bit nicer. So I'm just going to dial it back a little bit. And now that we have this layer, we can do things to this layer, such as blur it a bit. So I can take structure, wrong S word. I can take structure to the negative. And you can see when I do that, it's blurring a little bit. It takes a minute to catch up here. Let me just check my chat and see how we're all doing. Let's see what this is doing. So see how it's not affecting him, okay? You can see that it is blurring these things here as well as the background, okay? So I can even apply that twice. So I'm going to do that once, and then I'm going to apply my favorite, which is mystical, and I'm going to apply it quite high, okay? So it's blurring. Let me just show you what it's doing. Okay, so again, it's blurring. It is adding this contrast in the shadows, though, so I'm not crazy about that. So I might try a different blur one because I'm trying to minimize this highlights, right? Let's try glow. There's a few in here that are great for softening things, okay? So soft focus. Let's go to the extreme. We can lower the contrast. Let's try Orton Effect Soft. This one actually works really well. Okay. But I do find that it darkens. So we have to lower that. See how when I increase the contrast, those straw bits in the background come out again? So we want to minimize it, right? Now, if I want to erase these things in the background, keep in mind that this layer is on top, okay? So if I erase underneath, they're going to not work well together. So I should have done any erasing first and then duplicated my layer. But let's see what happens if I try erasing it on here, because I want to just try the erase tool and see about literally just getting rid of some of these grasses. The clone and heal tool is still not included in Luminar Neo, but it is coming soon. From what I understand, it's going to be in one of the next 2 updates, right? With the next edition of the next extension, which is noiseless. All right, let's see. Sheila loves the upside down trick. I live for the upside down trick, a standard in my workflow. I never thought it would work so well. Awesome. Yes, we love dragonflies. BCCS. So she's just giving the initials of the 4 things, Phil. So those 4 things that I put on the screen. Where are we here? Right. So brightness, such sharpness, color, and contrast. So whatever initials she's used there. So whatever you need to remember those 4 things. Okay, so let's see how my erase is doing here. Yeah, see, it's not erasing completely, right? Because I only have this layer at X% showing. And if I go back up here, I can increase the layer opacity, and then you can see that it does indeed erase better. So I should have erased first, okay? I should have erased first. Another thing that people are wanting in Luminar Neo that may or may not be coming, I'm not sure if they've promised this or not, is what's called a stamp layer. So I could make another layer, which is a combination of these two, and put it on top, right? And that's something that's not currently available. So I should come back down here to the bottom layer and do my erasing here. And let's just see if I can get it to remove. So again, remember, it's not going to be 100% because the layer on top is still showing part way, and it has the grasses included. Okay, so again, if you're going to do erasing like this, sharpness and saturation, contrast, color, saturation, sharpness, saturation. No, saturation is not one of the 4 rub. It's just color. So brightness, contrast, color, and brightness, contrast, color, and sharpness. So yes, Holly is correct. Sharpness. Oops. See, now I closed it. Let me do erase again. So now we're getting somewhere with these grasses. So I knew it would just sort of help to blend them in a little bit. Right? So you can go in and you can try and use the tools to darken those highlights, or you can use the erase tool. When the clone tool is available, you'll be able to lower the opacity of it so that you can just sort of minimize the grasses by partially cloning them out and not totally. Okay? So I'm using the erase tool to try and minimize or get rid of them. And I'm not doing a perfect job of it, but you're seeing the idea of what's happening here is it's minimizing these bright areas. Okay. I'm just going to take a swipe through here. The reason that I'm doing that, so can you see this pattern here that's developed? There's 2 rows here that look identical. So when you're cloning, try and eliminate or minimize repeating patterns. Okay. So when something looks the same, now I've just got a big mess. So I'm just going to restore. When something is repeating, it's a clear sign that you've cloned. Okay, so try and zoom in a little bit more. There, that's better. Do your cloning a little bit smaller, 1 dot at a time, like I'm doing here, and try and minimize getting those repeating patterns. So now I've got kind of a mess. I do find that if you zoom in and you do little by little, you'll do a better job with the erase tool than if you try and do a large erase from the beginning. Right now you can still see I've got a duplicate pattern, which kind of shows the grass. So I'm trying to get rid of that. It's not perfect, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to do here is minimize those bright areas. Okay, can you see that? If I wanted to keep going, I might even get rid of this one. Okay, clone it out, get rid of that. And I might darken this one here as well. Okay. Let's see, we can add a vignette on here as well to finish him up. So my vignette trick, remember, is to drag it down darker, get the shape and the size and the position. Let's put it on him, and then put the feather back up and adjust that way. Okay, so now he's kind of spotlighted against the background, and it looks fairly well blended. Right? So if we look at the image just without, any of the tools, does it look edited? That's the goal. Okay, you want to look at that and go, does the subject stand out? Yes, he does, because he's against that bright part of the image. Right? So he's kind of silhouette. Does it look edited? Can you see anything that's obviously edited besides my battery erase job? Okay, and that's sort of the goal. I might do a crop of this one as well because he's kind of small. I might want to come in a little bit. Let's see what Luminar thinks is composition AI. Okay, so I'm actually going to get rid of some of the stuff on the right because there's a lot of grasses and things that are really, let's go freeform here, sharp. And if I get rid of these sharp grasses, he's going to stand out more. So ideally, I would have liked to see something more like this. Actually, let's go about like that. right? And less space all around, okay? So come in, get rid of some of the sharp bits on this side. Now we just have the tree that he's on, and he stands out a lot more. One moment, I have to turn my fan up. I'm starting to cook. There we go. I'm trying to not cook myself before supper. All right, let's try another one. Now this one. No, whose image was this one? Sony. $29.90. This one is from Glenn Davies. Okay, and this one I thought was a really cool image of this cheetah. Okay, and I want to bring the cheetah out more. So there's a lot already working for this image. Okay. Let's start with the upside down trick. Okay, so before we even start, analyze your image. Okay, so the first thing I do is analyze the image. Okay, is there a clear subject? Yes. Can we bring him out even more? Yes, I'm sure we can. Okay, what are the good things about this image? Well, there's some really nice light. There's some nice space in front of the cheetah to look at. And he's right in the middle right now, so I'm already thinking a crop in my mind. Okay, and what else is it? What is not working? Okay, so again, we have these bright highlights in the background. Okay, so if we look at him upside down. Hey, John, nice to see you. John is a personal friend of Chris. Chris, where do I get Chris from? Rob and I. Coffee break friend. Who's your coffee break friend? Phil. Awesome. I'm going to be on another coffee break probably soon, Holly. So I gotta get into the schedule. Got to talk to Vanelli. So when we look at it upside down, again, these bright bits in the background. Okay. So I'm going to crop to get rid of some of the space behind him, because when you have a subject that is facing, I got to do this backwards, facing a certain direction, right? You want to leave space in front of him and less behind him. So he's got room to look into. So let's try the composition AI and move it around a little bit. So I find that it does a good job, but usually I have to move it in terms of amount cropped off, because look where his face is now. Okay, so now he's got space here, or maybe it's a she. Let's call it a she. Okay, much better composition immediately. Okay. Now let's go into develop raw. Okay, so when you're working with with a raw file, always do develop raw first. Even if you do another thing first, I'll show you an example. If you use another tool like Enhance AI, for example, okay, this one does actually a really nice job of, look at that, boosting it. Okay, so let's just say I do the Enhance AI first, but you'll notice over here under the edits, number of edits counted or number of edits done, it shows 2. Now that's the number of tools applied. Okay, so you'll see that Enhance has been applied, but it put develop raw underneath. Okay, because it knows that you want to do that first. Okay, so again, I can choose a camera profile. Well, that one is immediately more interesting, I think. Okay, so then I'm not sure what these stand for. SH. Brandon, can you tell us what these Sony profiles, what is SH, and what do all of these stand for? Because I'd love to know. I'm guessing, vivid. I'm guessing standard, vivid, black and white. There's another vivid. Flat? No, that's definitely not flat. So I'd love to know what these mean in terms of profiles. But that one, when I choose the SH one, it seems to be the best, right? I'm going to make sure chromatic aberration and defringe is turned on just in case. And do we have any noise here? Yeah, it looks like there's a little bit of noise. You can see that in the background there. So I'm going to do a little bit of noise reduction here on the raw file. And I'll do a little bit of sharpness, but I'll come back and use the tools independently. So you can do noise reduction and sharpness using the separate tools as well. And this is a question that I've had raised in the past as to, when would you do noise reduction and sharpening in the develop tool? If you've got a raw file, do some here. I find that I have less control over where it's going. And when I'm doing it on raw, on the develop raw, you can't mask it. Okay. So I tend to keep it a little bit on the lower side here because I can't mask it off certain areas. Okay. So let me look at the color. So color, right now it's as shot, but I feel like it should be warmer. So let's try daylight. Okay, infinitely warmer, immediately better. And do we want less pink? So maybe just a little bit less magenta. Okay, so see where we've gone so far with this image. I like where we're going with that. And now that we are in the edit panel, we're not in the original panel. There's no histogram here, right? Little trick for you. If you come back to your develop tool and you want your histogram, just open the curve section because there's your histogram, right? And you can still use the J key for clipping warnings, right? So if I decide I want to push up the whites, I get whites clipping. Or if I go the other way, I get blacks clipping. So I am going to add a little bit of black, okay, because I want to have some nice punch to the image. And maybe give it a little bit of smart contrast. Okay, the yellows are starting to get a little bit carried away, and these highlights here as well. So I'm going to tone the highlights down a little bit. But keep in mind, if we go too far, we're going to lose the cheetah. Now we could go a couple of different ways with this one. I could darken the background, or we could actually lighten the background and make it sort of light and airy because it seems like it's sort of foggy, right? Like there's like a maybe dusty here. So we could go the opposite way and lighten the background. Definitely some pink happening in the background. All right, so I like that so far. Okay, now when we go back to enhance, it might have gone too far because we should have done develop first. Okay, so now I can look at enhance, and it's actually doing an okay job, but I like what it's doing on the cheetah, not on the background. So now I'm just going to go in and mask it. Now I'll see if it chooses what it chooses here. I wish there was an animal. There's flora, but there isn't fauna yet in terms of mask AI. I'm hoping that's something that they add. Okay, so you can see that there's flora. Okay, sky. There's no sky in this picture, so I'm not sure why we're getting that. But let's see. No. Flora. I'm looking for one that picks most of the cheetah. Architecture. There's no architecture here, but it thinks that there is because it's looking for certain things in terms of, what is architecture. So the AI is not working as well as I'd hoped. So I'm just going to paint it in here. So I'm just going to use the brush. Oh, that's actually not too bad. Look at that. So I'm going to just clear it, and then I'm going to use the brush to paint it just onto the cheetah. Okay. So I cleared everything off, and I'm just painting it over the cheetah. So I want to enhance her. I think she's a her. And not the background. Okay, see that? Now that I've got it just on her, I can actually take it even farther. Let's get a little more of her face. There we go. So the eyeball here, right, turns off just this tool. And the backslash key shows the full before and after. So see how blue it was before? Right, now we've got a really warm picture. So again, like I said, we could go two different ways on this. I could try and darken some of these things, or we could lighten it. If I want to do any erasing, remember, let's do the erasing first before I copy the layer, if I want to go that way. We could also try relight here and see if that's going to work on the cheetah. Again, I just hit them to extremes here. So I take brightness up, brightness near up, and brightness far down. Okay. And then I want to see if I can get the depth adjusted to get her. Yeah, see, it still is going to need some masking. So I'm not crazy about this one, to be honest. It's not my favorite tool, and I honestly rarely use it because I find that there's better ways to do that, right? So if we want to darken the background, let's just take a vote here. Okay, so for those of you that are watching, do you think we should darken the background behind her so that she stands out as the lightest thing, and just a couple of highlights? Or should I lighten the background and then she will be the darkest thing? Because either will actually make it work for her to stand out. Okay, so if she's the darkest thing in the image, she will stand out like a silhouette. Okay, think about silhouettes. Okay, so what do we think? Lighten or darken? Lighten or darken? Stephanie said we got 3 lightens. Mark, James, Stephanie. We got 3 lightens, 4 lightens, 2 darkens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lightens and 2 darkens. Golden grass will show too much. All right. Well, let's try. It looks like a pretty even split now. Looks like 5 to 6. Okay, looks even. Well, I'm sort of torn as well. So let's try darkening first, and then we can always reverse it. Okay. So I want to go with a dark edge vignette. And because we cropped, okay, it does this weird thing. This is something that they're aware of and they're working on. So when you crop, your vignette should start at the edge of the image, right? Like this. So that's something they will be fixing. So let's make it really small. Okay, so we're darkening. So far, so good, right? I might move it over just a little bit. So this area is brighter, okay? So I'm going to move the vignette more this way. I can't make it any smaller, okay? I could do a second one, actually, okay? So I could do the vignette like this and darken that side of the image like so. Actually, let's try something. I've never actually done a double vignette. So let's just see what happens. So I'm going to go choose subject. Okay. And I'm going to darken over here like that. So we're darkening this right side. Okay. Still got those highlights though. And if we go too far, it's not going to look right. So I'm going to do one vignette. And then let's try another one. So I had it fairly round. And this time I want to darken that side of the image. So let's do something like that. I would wish I could have an oval, right? So there's a double vignette for you, right? I still want to see her a little bit lighter. So we could use a develop tool, or we could try this dodge and burn tool. So I haven't used this one a lot since they've added it back in, to be honest. So I'm going to go lighten and always keep the strength down under 15. I never paint with the dodge and burn tool higher than that, because if you go higher, it becomes really obvious, right? So I just want to lighten her face especially. So I really just want to do it sort of in stages, like build it up, right? I wanted to say layering it, but it's not really a layer. Let's go a little bit more. Let's get some of her front body here. And a little more on her face. So that's not too bad, right? So she's being lightened. The thing that, again, I don't like about the erase tool or this particular tool is it's harder to sort of fix it. You don't see a mask. There's no mask. You can't see where you've painted other than turning it on and off. Okay, so I find that I have less control with this one versus if I use the develop tool. Okay, so Rob, if you want to share the video I did on using the develop tool as the dodge and burn hack, right? This is how I do it in here, right? So I actually want to punch up the contrast, okay? Now I'm looking at just her, okay? So I'm looking at her, maybe a little bit too much white. I don't want to clip any of her fur. And bring the exposure up. Okay, remember exposure is midtones. Okay, so when you're adjusting exposure, you're adjusting for the midtones. And I want to keep some black. So I'm pushing up the exposure. And again, I want to do it just on her. So I'm going to start with a radial gradient, which is like a circle. So I'm just going to make sort of an oval around the cheetah to cover most of her body. Over here, like so. And it's got a nice sort of fade. Okay, so these two lines here are, you'll notice that it goes, you'll see the effect here fading into the middle. Okay, now of course this is opposite of what I want, because wherever it's red is the effect is applying. So I want to invert that. Okay, so it's just on her. Turn off my clipping warnings. And we'll just brush it a little bit more onto her face. So the difference between the dodge and burn and using this tool is that I have more options, right? So when we are in the adjustments here, I can adjust highlights, I can adjust shadows, I can give her more contrast, okay? Now I find that she's getting a little bit oversaturated, so I can dial that down a little bit. I can give her more sharpness, right? So there's lots more things here that I can do that I can't do with the dodge and burn tool. Okay, so I tend to prefer doing my dodge and burning this way. Okay. So there's a version darkened, right? And I could still go through and deal with some of those highlights in the background. One tool that's actually good for that is super contrast. Okay? It's under the professional section. And if you increase, this is how I use this tool, bring up the highlight contrast slider and then play with the balance. Okay, so if you go to the right, you're darkening your highlights. And if you go the other way, you're lightening. And you'll notice that when I darken the highlights, it does change the color as well. Okay, so I'm going to come back and deal with that another way. But we also want to only apply this on the background, right? So what I'm going to do is apply it, go back to develop, because I did a nice job masking just the cheetah here. And I'm going to copy this mask from develop. Okay. I want to see it, okay, like that. And then I'm going to paste it onto this one. And then I'll have to invert it, okay, because I've just pasted it onto her, right? So then we'll invert it. Now, because it's not perfect, I'm going to do a little more erasing on her. If I want, I can actually keep it on these little grasses down here. Okay, so let's see what it's doing. See how it's working on the background. And I'm going to copy this mask again, because I want to get rid of that saturation problem in the background. Okay, so I'm going to do that with color. So I can either just dial the saturation down overall, okay, or we can just do yellow. So let's work on the yellow. That's better. I want to shift that hue as well, because I feel like the background is too pink. So see how it's got a lot of, it's red. If you're not sure what color, just play with the sliders like this, go all the way. I just guessed with red, so I'm going to move it more this way so it's more orange and less pink. Okay. Like so. And of course, then I'm going to paste this mask so it's not on the cheetah. Okay, so once again, it's only affecting the background. So you can use the same mask over and over again. Okay, so see how that's fixing the color in the background? Now I can also do the same thing to blur the background using structure. So I like to do minus structure, right? And we can do both here. We can do minus structure. Obviously that's too far. So I'm just gonna go to an extreme. I shouldn't say always. I often go to extremes and then dial it back. So I just want to get it on that background, see what it's doing. And we can also mask it a little bit more to make sure that these foreground grasses are a little bit sharper. Okay, so I don't want them as blurry. So I want to keep it looking like the place where she's sitting should be sharp as well. Okay, like so. Then I'm going to apply structure again, but this time positive. Okay, and I'm going to use that same mask. So remember, it's masked onto her. Okay, paste and invert. So I've used the same mask a few times, just flipping it around. Okay, now you can see that she is being punched up. Okay. The one highlight that bugs me is this one on her nose here. So I'll probably go back in and do some work to get rid of that one. But there's the before and after, and we've gone with the darkening of the background. Okay. Who had a question? James had a question. Okay, let me go back here. Rob goes with both. You can't be neutral. Put a golden sun rays in the upper left corner. That could be cool. Yeah, okay, let's try that. Let's see. I haven't used the vignette tool very much. Seeing Darlene use it all the time, I'll start using it more. I pretty much use it on everything, Paul. Yeah, I vignette everything. Where is James' question? Sorry. Do I select the camera profile? I did select the camera profile, but you can only do that when you're in Develop Raw, right? Do I always use a camera profile? My personal workflow is I use Lightroom as my base in my organization. So I apply the camera profile there. So to answer your question, yes, I do. So I generally always use a camera profile of some kind, okay? Sometimes the Luminar one that's default and Adobe are fairly similar, the Adobe default, but I generally do always. And the optics, there's no reason not to apply the optics to get rid of any fringe that you might have, right? I don't know that we have any fringe here, but I'll see if there is on another image. Okay, so let me, who had the suggestion of the sun rays? That was a good one. I think that was Paul's maybe. Okay, let's do sun rays. Okay, so sun rays. This great suggestion, by the way, because she's sort of backlit, and you want to be careful when you're adding sun rays that it matches the image. So he said upper left because you see this highlight on the cheetah here. That's definitely where the sun is coming from. Okay, so to start with sun rays, you just have to increase the amount, and obviously that's not where we want it, and then place it. So I'm going to move it around, and it's, see how when you put it behind something, it actually sort of knows it's behind something. And I'm actually going to place it sort of almost out of the screen, off the picture, because I think it's sort of like a low sun, but let's go somewhere in there, right? Then I want to play with the settings. I usually like fewer rays if I want sort of a glow. And I like to warm them up a little bit because then they match the image. Don't go too crazy, but just matching. I'm trying to match the tonality, the color of the image. And then my favorite, which is randomize. So then I just sort of, go around until I see something that looks good. Might even do less rays. So I want her to be highlighted, right? That's actually kind of interesting right there. That's kind of cool. And the other one that's really neat to work on, I can work on less length of the rays here, is this overall look. Okay, if we go to the left, it actually does a really good job of darkening. When we go to the right, it tends to lighten. Okay, so if we had gone with the light, airy feel of instead of darkening everything, right, we would go this way. Well, let's try that. So let's do a before and after. See how it's actually done a really nice job on those highlights. Might do a little more randomizing. Yeah, I usually just kind of click around until I find something I like. I like the first one I had. Now I've messed it up. There we go. Okay, that's pretty close. If I don't want her to be darkened, we can soften the overall amount, right? So I increase the amount. I can just lower that a little bit. And of course, I can mask it off of the cheetah. Okay, so if I want it just not affecting her face. Okay. Great suggestion. And now I might go back and just lighten her a little bit more, but that looks pretty good. Okay. And then if we want to go crazy, we can get rid of some of these things in the background. We can try and get rid of one of these grasses that's really bright. It's the ones that are, sort of in the dark areas, because again, it's that contrast, right? So where there's a light and a dark, that's where your eye is going to go. So because the background is dark with a light piece of grass, it's really grabbing everybody's attention, right? So that's not bad, right? Let's just get rid of a couple of these. I find once you do the first one, the erase tool goes faster. This first one is always slow. I have no idea why, because it's analyzing the image and so on. Okay. Now I should be zooming in a little bit more. Let's go to about 50% because I want to deal with this one on the nose here. And I'm going to attempt. So see how I've just come over just the tip of her nose here? Let's see what happens. Nope. It got rid of her eyeball. So that's definitely not working. Kind of put everything out of whack, right? So something like this that's more complicated, I might have to go to Photoshop to do. Again, we can wait for the new clone tool and see if it does a better job. But currently this one, actually that's not bad. Now it just looks like it's crooked. Let's see. That's better. Let's see if we can live with that. Actually, that's not bad, right? And I could just go in and blur that a little bit, right? So the idea is I just want to tone down that bright highlight right next to her nose. So that's pretty good. Now I can do my duplicate layer, okay? And we can do it even farther, okay? So if I go to multiply here, we're going to get something really dark. Once it catches up with me. Yes, we do need a Command or Control Z or Z. I'm hoping that comes as well. Yes, good idea, Phil. All right, why is that not coming with me here? I think it just has to catch up. Give it a minute to catch up. Any other questions? Oh, does she have to go at 30 minutes? Any other questions about what I've done? And I do think the sun rays added something really cool there, right? But we can also go back and change it and make everything light. Another thing that I wish that Luminar Neo had is something like a virtual copy that Lightroom has, so that we can do a second edit without having to undo some of it, right? So if I want to keep this edit, what I have to do, I'm just going to get rid of this layer for a moment. If I want to undo it, I'd have to export this one as a saved finished one and make a new image, new JPEG, right? And then I would have to redo an edit, go back and undo some of these edits, right? So let's just do that. I'm going to come back to this one. She's going to stick around for a few more minutes. Cool. One thing I actually wanted to show you guys really quickly today was that I've been playing around with doing single image HDR and what this HDR Merge can do. And I played around with a few of my own. I'm actually going to be making a video that will come out later this week on this. But I wanted to take this one of Anne. So this is Anne Ambrose image. And I can't remember if I edited this one previously or not. I think I did. But what I want to do is I just want to drag this into the HDR Merge box, right? And you can merge just one image, okay? So you're merging it. So when I click on merge, it does its thing. And in my tests, I came out with the conclusion, if you will, that if you have an image that is really high contrast, like this one, it actually does a really nice job. And you can see my sort of messes of what I've been playing with. But look what it did, right? The only drawback is it goes from the raw file, so no edits are applied, but then you don't have develop raw, right? So look at the difference, though. Like, it's pulled out amazing detail from the sky that we didn't have before, right? I can enhance the sky even further, and I can do some things like, let's just bring the highlights down a little bit. And again, I like to check on my curves and my shadows and highlights. Make sure that I have nice white. It's a little blue feeling to me, so I'm going to give it. Oh, we do have daylight. Okay, so we do have the presets, so that's cool. I'm going to give it a little bit more warmth. That looks better. I do find that when you pull things into this HDR module as a single, it tends to oversaturate. Okay, so if you are going to use it, make sure that you pull the saturation down. But have a look at that. Let's just compare that. Let's see, where's the original here? Oops, now I gotta find it. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so there's the original unedited image. Pulled through HDR, and I did what? Two things. I did develop and enhance the sky. That's it. So that works pretty good, right? Let me try another one that was sent in. And I can't remember whose image this one is. 1953. This one is Al's. Okay, so Al's not here. We haven't seen Al in a while, but this is Al's image. So I'm going to do the same thing and merge this one. Okay. I'm sure she'll never leave you, Phil. Okay, so now it's done, and I actually pulled this one in earlier, so you can see what it's done here, right? So again, all I need to do is go into develop, make sure that I've got some nice black, right? So the key with making the image, it evens out the tones really nicely. But you want to make sure that it doesn't flatten everything and really, really watch the saturation, right? So I'm adding black using the curves, okay? So the trees are clipping, and I might just darken the whole thing a little bit, like so. I'm not sure what kind of color is happening there, but you get a really, again, just two tools. Right? And look what's happening. Two tools. That's it. This one I would probably crop. I'm going to go freeform on this one because there's a lot of foreground here that's not really needed. I'm just going to get rid of some of this foreground right up to the road even. Like that. Right? And that was what? 2 tools again. So try that HDR Merge. Just a curiosity, quick survey. How many of you have HDR Merge in Luminar? Because I found that this tool in particular did a really great job on single images like this, right? You could try this one as well. Okay, so see how this one is also really contrasty. You have to go from here, so you have to be able to see the thumbnails and then just drop it in. Holly's had it but haven't tried it. Well, now you're going to have to try it on some images that are contrasty, because look what that just did, right? That sky came out and there's no halos. See that? How many times when we darken the sky, we end up with a halo? I feel like this one's really crooked, like really crooked, like that. Okay. Let's try something like that. Let's see what that's done. It's brought out such amazing detail everywhere. So we got to be careful with the sky enhancer. Okay, so we want to avoid the dreaded halo. So a halo is part of the sky is dark, and then you get this light outline around things. Okay, so I'm going to go easy on these ones, real gentle. And then just go develop again. So same thing. I'm going to darken the whole picture a little bit. I'm going to make sure that I've got some white. So I bring this up until I start seeing clipping, and then just back down again, or in and then out. Okay. So I'm looking for, see these little red bits clipping, and then bring it back. And then black on this side. I want to have some shadows. So try not to eliminate your shadows. The main reason an image looks flat is because it has no shadows, okay? And it has no black. So I'm going to bring the saturation down. Remember I said that kind of goes a little crazy. Let's do something like that. Again, really quickly from that, which came out of HDR, to that, right? And we can work with this to add a vignette and, you know, do a few more things. But I just wanted to show you how quickly we could go from, I keep forgetting to mark it as a favorite. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so we went from that to that. And that was the HDR module. Okay, so don't be afraid to try that HDR module. It's actually doing a really nice job on some of these images that have high contrast. I did try it on a person and it didn't do so well. You know, if we want a grunge look, perhaps, let's try it on this one. This is a JPEG, so I'm not sure how well this is going to go with this one, but let's just see what happens. I'm not sure that it did all that much, to be honest, right? We can kind of play with the grunge look on that one, but I don't think it did all that much. Okay, where am I at? Do we have time to do one more? I had promised Danelle I would do something funky with this one of her bird. I think this is Danelle's DSF. I'm just looking to see whose image this is. Daniela. Okay, so Daniela's not here, but I promised her I would do something funky with this one because I had some ideas of what to do with this one, right? Now, the bird is basically breaking the rule of what I just said earlier about having space looking in front of him, but I'm not sure that I want to crop half of this image out, right? Because if we crop half this image out, we're going to lose a whole bunch here. So if I try and put more space in front of him, we're going to lose a lot of the image. And I'm not really sure that that's making it any better. Okay, now we've just got this tree, which is really busy, and I'm not crazy about it. Let's see what Luminar thinks is a good cropping. Okay. If anything, I want to get rid of some of these busy branches. and maybe this one on the left. So that's actually not too bad. Let's go a little bit closer. I'm trying to simplify so that we get rid of some of the busyness of these branches, right? So the exposure on this one is pretty good. I want to see if the bird is sharp. Okay, he looks pretty sharp, but we could definitely use some sharpening. Okay, so I'm going to check the histogram and tuck in on this side to make sure that I've got some whites. Okay, see how the clipping shows up here, and then I just bring it back. Okay, so the right slider here on the curve is whites. So I'm bringing the whites in, and then the left one is blacks. Bring the blacks in. And if you want to go a little bit slower, use the blacks and the white slider. And curve kind of takes you farther faster. Right? See how it's shaping up a little differently, right, when I use curves. And then I'm just going to bring the highlights down a little bit. Something like that. There we go. Okay, so again, I can go down here and use, I don't think there's any fringe here, but let's just check. So if there was a color fringe, you would see it on the edge of the trees, but it doesn't hurt to check these things off because it's not going to do anything bad. Okay, and there is a little bit of noise and there could be some extra sharpness. So we can give him a little bit of sharpening. If you do the sharpening here, see what that does? It definitely brings him up in sharpness, but you see how it's actually sharpening the noise as well. Make sure you use the masking slider because it will keep it off areas like the sky. Okay, so I'm not going to bring this up quite so high. I'm going to come back and use sharpening in the details tool where I can mask it onto him. Okay. Same thing here. I'm going to do a little bit of noise reduction. But if you go too far with your noise reduction, okay, you end up removing the sharpness that you just added. Okay, so now we can see the noise reduction is the noise is gone, but so is the sharpness. Okay, so noise and sharpness really go hand in hand together. Right, when you increase one, you usually have to increase the other. Okay, but if we go to an extreme where we increase the sharpness and then we increase the noise reduction, you end up with just sort of a blob. Okay, so be really careful that you don't sharpen your noise and that you don't remove too much sharpness with the luminosity, the noise reductions sliders. How's his color? His color is actually good. We might give him a little bit more yellow, but his color looks pretty good. Actually, the way it was shot, right? So I'm happy with that. And all we've really done is just adjusted that a little bit, given him a little bit of contrast, right? Now, again, if I want to darken the background, we could duplicate the layer. We could do all kinds of things. I could use some dodging and burning, right? I'm just going to use develop again. And this time I'm going to bring the highlights down. I'm going to lower the contrast. And again, keep in mind, I'm looking at everything except the bird, okay? Now he looks too yellow. Actually, let's just desaturate. There we go. He looks too yellow, okay? And I want to paint it in so it's not on the bird. So the best way to do that would be to brush, erase it from him. Okay, so if you want your mask to apply or your effect to apply to the whole image except a small area, start with the erase brush. If you want it to apply to a small area, then start with the paint. Okay, so for example, if I painted, it would eliminate everything except where I paint. Actually, let me just do that. Okay, so I'm going to paint over him. Okay, so see, wherever I paint, that's what's being affected. Okay, so he's being darkened, right? And that's the opposite of what I want, right? So I can just go back in here and invert the mask. Okay. Now it's a little bit too obvious, right? So I'm just going to come in and dial it back a bit. Okay, so I went too far on purpose to dial it way down. And let's make it more subtle. See what that's doing. Not crazy about what's happening with the color, so I'm just going to fix that. There we go. Okay. So just darkening everything except him. Okay. And now I could do the same thing. I could actually take that mask. I should have copied it. And do some softening of the tree. So I'm going to copy this mask. Okay, so how can we soften? Okay, there's several tools. I'm going to use details in a moment. Phil, why don't I use presets or layers? Okay, I do use layers. I don't use presets as much. Keep in mind that in Luminar, if you use a preset, it overwrites everything you've already done. So if you're going to use a preset, you have to use it first, right? And then adjust from there. When would I use details? After this. So let me soften first. So I'm going to do structure minus again. Okay, so I want to blur things. So see how it's softening? It's doing a really nice job on the background. Look at that. Okay. I'm going to use that same mask. I just copied it. So I'm going to paste. And of course, let me see where the mask is. Okay. So it's basically everywhere except on him. I want to make sure that I'm not softening him at all. And I want to keep the tree that he's sitting in sharp as well, right? Because wherever he's sitting would be sharp. So see what that's doing? It's blurring a lot of this stuff here. So I'm not going to go quite that far. Then I'm going to use details. Okay, so combination of minus structure to blur some stuff. Then I'm going to use details. Let's come in a little closer. So this is where you'll find sharpening as well. And this we can mask. Okay, so I want to sharpen him, but I don't want to sharpen everything else that I just blurred, right? So see what happens if I take sharpening quite high, right? So it's doing a nice job. I do find that if you have an image that is a little bit out of focus, if you take the small details slider up, I'm going to extremes here, it will enhance the sharpness look of the image and even help an image that is slightly out of focus, right? So I'm going to take the masking up a little higher. Let's see what that's doing. So I'm looking for detail on his feathers. Okay, so see how that's doing a nice job, but it's not sharpening the background. Okay, if I want to make sure, I can paste in that same mask. Okay, but of course it's affecting the opposite thing again. So I'm going to invert it. So now it's just on the bird. So now we can take it a little farther. Just sharpen him a little bit more. So now we're sharpening the bird and the tree that he's sitting on and nothing else. So before and after. And now I'm going to use a layer as well. Okay, so just for you, Phil, I'm going to use a layer. And my idea with this one is to add one of my bokeh overlays. Right, so I want to, unfortunately, you can't currently add a whole bunch of layers. These are all things that I've previously added, so they're already in here. So I want to find one that's got some blue and some big spots. So I think this one might actually work well, or the yellow one. So honestly, the color of the bokeh that I add, okay, as an overlay doesn't even really matter because I can change its color. So I just want to kind of get it positioned where I think it's going to look good. And of course, we can mask it off him, right? And I'm going to change the blend mode. Usually with bokeh, I want to try either lighten, right? Might have to increase the opacity, screen, okay, see how that's showing up, or overlay or soft light. Okay, this one's a little bit too much. Look what happens if we use soft light, keep the opacity low. It actually helps to bring him out as well. Okay, so we get this sort of bokeh in the background, and we can mask him out a little bit more. right? Overlay looks pretty good. If we don't like the color of the bokeh, I'm going to leave this up high for a moment. And let's just put it on normal. Okay, so I'm going to work on just this color of this bokeh. Okay, opacity 100, normal, you see only this layer, right? If I want to shift the color, we can do that here, right? Shifting the color. There's a hue shift slider at the bottom of the HSL, and we can literally make this whatever color we want, okay? So if I want it more purple, right? Might help to actually see what we're doing now. So let's put it back on overlay. So we can shift the color this way. Oh, maybe yellow, orange, maybe, okay, for some contrast, or more pink. Or we can just take the color out, okay? We can literally just make this more sort of white bokeh, and then it would blend a little bit nicer, okay? So that's not a bad idea, okay? So we can just get rid of the saturation, like so. So let's dial it back a little bit. Now it looks like it's behind the tree actually really nicely, because your bokeh would be sort of in the background, and I'm kind of happy with that. So let's just see the before and after. Okay. Smash the like button. So I hope that answered your question, James, about when I would use details. So I use details to bring out the sharpness, and when I want to mask it to a certain area. Okay, so the sharpness sliders and adjustment part of the develop raw tool, you can't mask because it's develop raw, it applies to the whole image. When I want to use it only on part of the image, then I will use details. Okay. And that's editable as well. Now, okay, we're on this layer still with the bokeh, right? I can actually soften the bokeh as well. See how that softens it, makes it the bokeh itself softer by adding some mystical, right? I could also add a texture or another bokeh in a different color. Let's say we want some pink ones, right? So we can add some pink bokeh. And let's just see. Let's try that one. Now I used overlay on the last one. I want to use like screen or lighten, I think. There we go. Right. Now you can also flip these, move them around. You can resize it. And again, I can change the color. If I don't want the color, I can just minimize the color of the bokeh, and you can also mask it out. Right. So if I don't want this one on top of him, I can just literally mask it out or keep it softer. Right. So that was my initial idea when I first saw this image, because I was like, oh, this is a perfect one to use bokeh on. Hey, Marty. Thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. More to consider. And yeah, I mean, all of these tools are things that I demonstrate in my Luminar Neo course. So let me just bring that up on the screen for the moment. And we're going to have to sign out soon. I think my computer is hitting maximum maximum heat, as well as myself. I'm running out of water in my little AC unit. So I'd love to hear from you. If you picked up a tip today, what did you pick up? Was there a tool that I used that you haven't used before, or you haven't used it a certain way that you haven't used that I did? Did you pick up any tips on how to approach photo editing? Tell me in the chat if you're still watching live, or if you're watching this replay later, put it in the comment area below. Tell me what you learned and what you picked up from watching this video. Well, thanks so much, Phil. I hope to see you again. We do Luminar every second week. So next week is Lightroom, and then Luminar will be doing again in 2 weeks. But if you use Lightroom as well, come join us next week. And the neat thing is that even if I'm using Lightroom to edit and you're primarily or just using Luminar, you can still pick up tips for how I'm approaching it in terms of where I get from the before to the after. And then you can try to do the same thing using Luminar Neo, okay? Because for me, they're all just tools, and I use the tools that get me to the results that I want, right? And my workflow, I use Lightroom, Photoshop, a couple of Topaz plugins, which might change after we hear about these next extensions with Luminar. Honestly, if I can get rid of Topaz in my workflow and just use Neo and it does sharpening to the level that Topaz did and denoise, I'm all in with Neo. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, that was kind of my idea. Like I said, with that image, let me just find it again. When I first saw that image of the bird, that was the first thing that popped into my mind was bokeh. Right? Okay, good reminder, Deb. Yeah, copy your mask. I mean, you don't have to copy it, but if you're doing something similar or opposite, it just makes it quicker, right? Because you don't have to keep doing it again. Yes, please do, James. We keep doing it this time until we probably hit maybe end of October, and then we actually switch to Saturday for the winter in the Northern Hemisphere. It'll be summer in the Southern Hemisphere for our friends down under. Then we switch to Saturday afternoon because we assume everybody in the summer likes to be outside on Saturday. So awesome. Thanks, Ron. Sheila, I've established a good workflow from Lightroom and Neo, and of course, my confidence is getting better the more I do. Awesome. 10,000 hours, right? You got to put in those 10,000 hours. Oh, thanks so much, Phil. Yes, I know Holly is a big fan, and we miss her when she's not here. So I'm glad she brought you along today. Take care, Brandon. I hope you enjoyed the edit of your image, and I've got the other one that I may do in a couple of weeks of your other flying. Looks like was it an eagle? Topaz is getting on your nerve. It just takes a really long time to process it in Topaz is my big thing. The amount of masking I did was an eye-opener. Okay, yeah. So that's the one thing I like about the tools in Luminar is that you can mask anything. And now with Luminar Neo, which you couldn't do in Luminar AI, but you could do in Luminar 4. So for me, Luminar Neo is the best combination of Luminar AI and Luminar 4 because you can apply the tools more than once. So like I did with the vignette where I vignetted on one side and then the other. And also likewise, you can apply structure minus on one area and then plus on another area like I did on the cheetah. Okay. Do you get strange worming effects using Neo's details effects the more you push the sliders? You certainly can, John, and that's true of any program or software that has any kind of sharpening tool. Is if you push things too far, then yes, you will start to get artifacts. Actually, if you want to share, Rob, I just did a video last week on how to know when you've gone too far, or 7 editing sins, basically. Take a look at that, John, and see that might help you to know sort of what to look for in terms of how far is too far. Okay? Hey, Merle, I actually have some of your images. Looks like you joined us late. Charles as well. Let me see what I've got from one of your images, Merle, because here, let's just have a look. Because I know I had one of yours from before. Let's see. Do you recognize any of your images, Merle? I'm thinking, let me just find it. You're shooting Nikon, I think, right? You've got a mountain. You got the next one of the castle. Okay, I know there's a castle. Let's try this one. Okay, so this one here, if we look at it just by itself, okay, so again, super contrasty, right? So let's drag that into HDR and see what it does. And I literally Oh, one of the ones I did was yours. Okay, cool. Yeah, I thought one of these was yours, Merle. Probably the landscape one with the water, right? Right. So this one I think would do well also, right? So it just helps to it really is sort of almost magical in terms of cutting the contrast. Look at that. So HDR, darken it. What more can you ask for? You know, that's pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Look at that. And the only thing I might do here is straighten it because it seems to be a little crooked. There we go. And I'm going to go off aspect ratio here. All of this stuff in the foreground kind of doesn't add to, it keeps you away from the actual subject. So I'm going to crop some of this out, maybe all of it, right? Because it's separating your eye, right? It's a light area and a dark area. So I'm going to crop that. And we got a fire hydrant. I would use the erase tool and get rid of the fire hydrant, something as well. Maybe even crop from the left a little bit more. Let's go. Oop. Let's go a little bit from the left, from the right, pardon me, and do something like that. So yeah, get rid of that fire hydrant. This is an easy erase. This one I'll probably do a really good job. And that's what I love about this erase tool. It actually is really, really good at content aware fill. Look at that. Boom. So what did I do? Develop, darkened it, cropped it, erased the fire hydrant, and we're done. Call it a day. If we try to do that same thing with the original image, right? I find that you end up, if I just darkened, right? Well, let's try that. Here, let me just grab the one that I just did here. And where is it? Yeah, let's put it in here. And I'm going to copy the edits that I did on this one. Okay, so I'm going to select them both. And I'm going to do right click, adjustments, sync. Okay, so as long as this one has got the blue line around it, it's going to take the adjustments from this one and put it on the other one. Okay, so let's see how well that works. Okay, so there's the paste. It didn't paste the crop, obviously, so we can go in and just do a little crop again. I'm not going to worry about cropping I'm not going to worry about the fire hydrant for now. So let's just do a crop. Oh, and it's crooked still. Let me just straighten that. Hard to tell. There we go. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about the fire hydrant. So I just want to compare these two really quickly. Okay, so there's the one that came out of the HDR Merge. Again, remember the colors seem to be more saturated, so I might dial that down a bit more. Okay, and there is the same exact settings on the original image. So it does a really good job. Looks like it's kind of squished, doesn't it? Why is it squished? Oh, that's interesting. I need to do more experimentation there. Right, so definitely something has happened in the process there. That's interesting. To be, oh, there we go. Looks like I just have to wait for it to crop. Okay, so there's the original. I just have to wait for it. There we go. Okay, so it's definitely more colorful than I would like it. And I'll just come in here and dial the saturation down a little bit. I would also probably add some blacks because I find that it's removed too much black. But other than that, pretty good job, right? And it's not only maintained the nice detail. I found that on the ones that I tested, it didn't produce a lot of noise either, right? It looks pretty nice. So definitely there's the tip for the day. Watch for a video on this later this week. I need to go and eat some supper myself. Let me get the slide up on the screen again to remind you how to submit your images. So, Phil, if you're still here, you can submit your images. So everybody that was watching that had their images edited today, use this form to submit their images. So I love it if you would send me one, either for next week or for the following week, and just indicate on the form which software you use and sort of your software of choice in terms of your main software. And then I will demonstrate that image using that software. Right. So obviously I can't do all the images that I'm sent, but I keep a sort of a stockpile of the ones that have been sent in, and I work through them. Some like Merle's that I have for a while, and now it just worked really nicely with the HDR Merge. So I'd love it if you sent me some of your images for me to have a go at, and then you can see how it all works with your own images. Thanks everybody for joining. It's time to go for us. I am melting. Thanks for joining. Please give this video a thumbs up and bring a friend. Okay, Holly brought Phil. Everybody that's here, bring a friend in 2 weeks or next week as well for Lightroom, and we'll have a big party. So take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time.